Welcome to the Confidence in Singing podcast, where you can reclaim your voice and rediscover the joy of singing. I'm Aideen, and my guests include singers and voice experts who share their insights and journey to encourage singing for health, happiness, and fun. To support this podcast and join the Confidence in Singing community, just click on the Patreon link below. Juliana, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you to the podcast. Today we're welcoming... Good. Today I'm welcoming Julianna Jay, who is a heart and soul guide, a spiritual educator. So you might wonder how this relates to singing. Well, that will all become really obvious as we go through the podcast interview. But I want to give you a little bit of Juliana's background, just so you can hear a little bit of what she does. So as a soul guide, author, a spiritual growth educator and master akashic records reader, Juliana lives life to the fullest and shares wisdom, gleaned from the Upstairs crew, you can explain that to us later, as a regular guest on international telesummits, podcasts and radio shows. So what Juliana does is she supports you in identifying your soul story and removing the limiting beliefs that can block your true nature and to uncover what you came here for. Beautiful. And through her soul mentoring and healing sessions and online masterclasses, as well as daily media posts, she walks with you, lighting the way to your true destiny, embracing you at soul level, empowering you to evolve and inspiring you to leave your legacy of love on this earth. That's a beautiful mission statement, Juliana. Can you tell people a little bit about the Upstairs crew? I thought that might be of interest.
I can. About a decade ago, the Upstairs crew became real for me, quite explosively, really. I was reared a Catholic Irish girl and followed that pathway. And that pathway said very little about universal energies. It said very little about the angelic realm. It said very, very little about ascended masters. It said really that there was God, the church and community. And for me, I suppose there was moments where that worked for me really, really well and created a wonderful foundation. But I think inside I was looking for more. And I was in the corporate arena, and one night I had a dispute at work, which was very unlike me because I was very much a yes person. There was a particular structural change and a change of management, and it wasn't aligning with me, and I said, this is actually going to be difficult for me and my family. And no was not accepted. There was like a bullying energy that followed it, and it made me very rocky inside, because I had trusted the people who I was working for. They were like a family to me. So that night I went to bed and I felt very let down. I felt very betrayed. And a voice came into my head and said, get a pen and paper. I remember thinking, am I going loopy now too? But it was a comforting voice. It was not a scary voice, or it wasn't a surreal voice. It was a very steady voice. And I really felt like I needed guidance at that moment. So I was in a wonderful hotel, and there was a notepad beside me and envelopes and a pencil. And I grabbed it and put it on my knee as I wrote. And my whole body shut down. And all that was left moving was my right hand. The rest of me was frozen out like a plank. It was just like being on a slab, but my right hand was moving. And I was writing down words that I had no cognizance of. I was not aware of the thought process in putting those words together. The words were forming themselves like a painter on the page. It was just forming, and it was creating a message. Halfway through, I got nervous and I said, who's writing to me? And they said, we're your angels. And I I think if I had been in my mind, that would have scared me because I wouldn't know right from wrong. But it was really soothing. It was really soft. It was very supportive, loving and gentle. So my hand kept going, and I remember my hand being sore from writing, but I couldn't stop my hand writing. And it felt like I was looking down on my body as my hand was writing. And then it stopped, and I read back what I'd written, and it was the most profound, guiding statement that was full of truths that I didn't want to see. It wasn't nasty, it was truthful, it was real, it was guiding, and it was supportive, and it was affirming for me, and it was clear. And I remember being so moved, I was in tears. I was like, wow, there's something watching over me. There's more than me. This is clearer than me. Whoever this is knows more about me and how I tick than I do. And I would like to say I've always been compos mentis right through my life. So this was very hard to yield control to something else that could be more than me.
Mm-hmm.
Over 10 years, that experience has become part of my life, where I have integrated who I call the upstairs crew, who are the light beings, the illuminations of light, the sacred ones. And for each person that's different. Some people will call that God, some people call that the Holy Spirit, some people will call that Buddha, some people will call that universal energy, some other people will call it quantum physics. The beauty with myself is I don't care what you call it. I'm there for anyone who believes in more. I've never put my opinions on somebody because it's not okay, because each of us have to come to our own conclusions in my eyes. But for whatever you believe in more, they are the upstairs crew who write through me, and they not alone write for me, but they also bring soul guidance to other people in the same way, with that clarity, with that love, with that support, and that 360 eye that sometimes we can't find within ourselves.
That's beautiful.
So
and I can tell you I've had my experience with that as well. The reason I set up my business, some of the people listening will know how I started my business, but I was actually guided to start my business as well. It wasn't written down, but I had an inspiration. And like you say, when something comes into your mind that you didn't come up with, it feels odd, because you realise I didn't do that. I didn't link those thoughts together and come up with a conclusion the way you would in a maths equation or something like that. What I got was I got a whole phrase put in my mind: do a workshop for adults. This is before I taught singing, and I knew I wanted to do more with music, and I said do a singing workshop for adults. And I didn't see myself as a teacher. All my life I had wanted, the phrase I had said to many people was, I want to be a singer, but I can't do that. And it had taken me a long time to even do my singing. And it was I genuinely considered a divine inspiration. So to me, I guess that was my version of the upstairs crew.
Mm-hmm. And you know, the word inspiration comes from Latin, and it means in spirito, which means it comes from spirit. It comes from something in that spiritual essence of who we are. And for those who believe in there being a meaning and a purpose to our lives, rather than just a body and a mind at play, there will be many, many unexplained moments of inspirito, where that inspiration comes in that is like a touch of the master's hand. It's something that doesn't have words, cannot be explained, but is felt so deeply inside that you're under no illusion, but that you've been touched by something that wishes you well, and that has a bigger plan. and that is guiding you.
And I suppose then thing to bring it to our focus point is when it's guiding you to speak up or to act in a different way, or like for me to stand up in front of a group of people and teach singing when I'd never done that before. I had been meditating for a number of years, and I'd been to India. No, I hadn't been to India at that stage, but I had gained some trust in that spirit, and I had gained some trust in the guidance I was getting that made me feel like it was almost like I could reject what was said and nothing would be held against me. But I felt like I have to try it. It's an idea. It might even be a really good idea, and I need to take that next step. So when you're working with people around following the guidance and speaking up, or letting our voice come out more, what would you say to someone at that stage?
I think I meet everybody at that stage. They're at some level of a crossroads where what they have been doing is not enough anymore. There is a calling for more. That calling could be to have a child that they haven't had before, or another baby. That calling could be to get married, or for a lot of people it's a calling to do something that requires them to stand tall and to do something they haven't done before, that they have what they would have called years ago a vocation or a calling for, that there's something inside calling you, and it's called you many times, and it's come knocking on the door. But when you've never been that, and you have no confidence that you can do that because you've never done it, you just have a sense and a feeling and a knowing that there's something inside of you that possibly could do this. When people come to me in the same way as I wrote for myself that night, it's called scribing. So it's how the Course in Miracles would have been written. It's how Conversations with God would be written. They're all scribed books. When people come to me and they don't know me at all, and I don't know them, I get Aideen has paid by PayPal. I don't know you. I don't look you up. I don't anything. I know this probably feels far-fetched, but this is where the miracle comes in. I literally put on meditation music, go into my space, raise my vibration, and write down the words. And I have no idea what those words mean, or even what they could mean. Sometimes I'm like a piano player, just dancing on the keyboard, just playing on the keyboard. I'm correcting so many errors because I've been going so fast, because it's a complete piece of work. And it forms a letter, which I call Signpost from the Soul, which again was an inspirito which they gave me. And that letter goes to that person by email. And often within that letter, the very things we're talking about are in there. So there's reference to the singing voice, or there's reference to the teacher, or there's reference to the traveller, or there's reference to taking the next step and trusting that lover. I don't know what that means, because your privacy is completely contained. It's a letter between you and your soul. But something magical happens in that if you're at a crossroads thinking, could I be a teacher? Why would I be a teacher? How could I be a teacher? Sure, I've never been a teacher before. I've never gone to the training college. Why? Who's going to say I can teach? All this stuff that starts coming up. When that stuff starts coming up, and this letter comes from nowhere, from someone you don't know, and speaks about your teaching and the fact that you have the ability to guide with your words and hold space for people to bloom and grow. Something transformative happens in that energy, where you're put right back to who you were always supposed to be. And that seed that was sown gets a little bit of water. And from that water, great growth comes. And I watched so many journeys bloom and grow that I could never speak of. But I know their fear. I know where they've come, and the next thing you hear, Aideen's doing classes, and you're like, oh my God, she did it, and there's these little tiny buzzes in my soul, and my heart warms, and I go, oh my God, she found her courage, she found her voice, she found a way, and she found her way, and it's kind of magical. And it's very, very meaningful for me to be trusted with somebody's journey and
absolutely.
Then finding their way.
I feel similar in my own work, but a lot of people, it takes them a lot of hand-holding to even come to their first class with me, because even though I teach singing, I don't teach people who call themselves singers. I teach people who I call my people adults who want to learn to sing for fun. It's so that the label isn't off-putting, because a lot of people won't consider themselves for that next step of working with me if they think it's for singers and they're not one. And what kind of advice would you give to someone who feels they're just not enough and their voice is not enough?
What a beautiful question. I think deep down inside us, there's a yearning for our life to have meaning. And there is a whole cultural conditioning that has happened within us that has asked us to be anything but ourselves. So there's the kid who stands up at 7 in the class and makes everyone cry because it can sing like a lark. And therefore, when you begin to evolve, the first 7 years of our life, we're working on our base chakra, our identity, our tribe, our family. And the second 7 years, then we're working on who am I in my sacral and how do I relate to the world? How do I fit in? So you're in school and you weren't chosen for the mass to sing, even though you thought we were okay. Or someone looked at you and thought you were out of tune. Or you were too high beside the person next to you, so you sounded like you were a different key. And all of a sudden, you begin to get assumptions over fitting in and not fitting in, or a teacher has said something. And the basis of the conditioning starts then that I am not enough. My voice doesn't fit. So I want to give you an analogy which you can use in life as well as just this particular scenario. Can you imagine being in an orchestra and you're a beautiful violinist and you are placed beside the trombone, and every time your little fiddle, your fingers and the bow connect, there's this blast from the trombone and you can't be heard. No one hears you. No one gets it. No one even can feel you're there because this trombone is drowning you out. And you can't even hear, are you in tune? And you're lost because you're in the wrong place. It's a little bit like that for the voice in the world. If you aren't with your tribe, if you're not with people who can accept you as you are with your voice and that your voice is good enough, you may feel drowned out. You may feel like you have to shout. You may feel like your voice is not enough. You may feel like what you have to say needs to be said in a completely different way if you're actually going to make it in the world, because you're sitting as a beautiful violinist beside a trombone. Mm-hmm. If we place you on this earth by you moving slightly and sitting with the other violinists and maybe a cello player and a few flutes, you can blend in, you can do your quaver notes, you can be heard, your lilt will be, just a little touch of you will come through because you're not drowned out. Mm-hmm. So if we live our life thinking, I am not enough, and that I've got to do something with my voice, I have to amend me, I have to twirl myself upside down for my voice to be enough, we're in serious trouble, because we'll be drowned out by the world. Because I believe that each one of us has come with a signature voice, something about our voice that in the right place in the orchestra of life, that voice is exactly what's needed. And our little quest is to find the place where that little voice fits just as it needs to be. I do a lot of retreats, and I remember I was teaching chanting at a retreat, and at the end we did it outside. It was one of these rare days in Ireland where it was warm, and afterwards 2 ladies came up to me who didn't know each other, and they said to me separately, "That girl over there is a great voice. I love listening to her." So I went over, and the girl's name was Ailish, and I said, "Ailish, the two ladies separately have come over to me and said they really enjoyed your voice." And she looked at me and she said, "My voice?" I said, "Yeah, your voice." "What do you mean my voice?" She said, "I can't sing a note. I could never sing a note. God almighty," she said, I wasn't even asked to sing at school. She said, I kind of took a chance in doing the chanting because everyone else was doing it. But she said, to be honest, I think I got lost in it, she said, because normally I'd never sing. So I went back to one of the ladies and I said, Ailish was amazed that you liked her voice. I said, what was it about her voice? It was so low, she said. It was like this wonderful bass note going through the chant. And she said it seemed to keep a steady beat for my voice, which is soprano. And I went back and I said, Ailish, this is what she said. And Ailish cried. And she says, my voice has never fitted in before. So in that moment, she was given back the gift of her voice being enough by total strangers in a field in Ireland, unbeknownst to herself. But she reclaimed something. And I said, your voice is exactly the way it's supposed to be. Your job is to find the best place to utilise that voice, just as it is.
And that's very profound. So your voice is exactly where it's meant to be, and your job is to find the place that it should be utilised.
It's exactly how it's meant to sound, but you have to find the place where you don't have to shout and you don't have to scream and you don't have to, as Brené Brown says, puff yourself up or shrink yourself down in your voice in order to fit in. You just need to be you. And where that voice is supposed to be used will find people who go, wow, I love being with you. I love singing beside you. I loved that duet between us. Our voices are so different. But at a soul level, there will be people who never sing, but they use their voice in the most amazing ways. Look at you tonight using your voice for podcasts to send ripples right across the world, not knowing where they're going to go, who's going to hear them, and you're using your sound waves to cast magic, not asking where it will go, but just trusting it'll go where it needs to go. And the voice is something that needs to be reclaimed as part of the soul. I had a particular client, and she came to a Christmas night I was doing, and I love to get things right, and I was frustrated because the CD player wouldn't work. And I was like, that worked all day, why wouldn't it work now? And I was annoyed. I wanted it to be right. And this voice in my head said, there's someone in this room who can sing. And I said, okay, there's someone in this room who can sing. I really need help. And you could hear a pin drop. Nobody speaking. And then 2 ladies on both sides, the benevolent friends, went, and she's like this. And I said, her name was, I'll leave her nameless, we'll call her Alice, okay? And I said, Alice, is there any chance you would sing for me, because the CD player, and it's Christmas and I'd love a Christmas carol. And her voice went, well, I can't really sing. And the two friends were laughing, going, she can sing, because they'd heard her drunk many a time singing. So I said, could you try? And she said, for you, I'll try. And she took out her phone and she read the words and she shook like a leaf. And she sang, O Holy Night. And in that song, if you know it, Aideen, there's a line in it, and the soul felt its worth.
Wow.
And she stopped singing and the whole room was in tears, because she had moved everyone with her shaking and with her whole terror, and yet this booming voice coming out of her. It took about 6 months before she came into me for what I call soul sessions with the signpost and the soul letter. It had turned out when she was 7 years of age, she had the most amazing voice. Amazing. And she had a teacher in the school who used to ask her to stay in during such time, which is, what would you call it, break time in Ireland. And he asked her to sit on his knee and sing. And it was perverse. And she has started to associate her voice with a curse, because it got her in trouble. Mm-hmm. And until that night, she had never sang without wine in her. And the reaction from everybody around her was so applauding. She now sings. She's began to go back into the community singing. She's joined the folk group. And the same night, there was another woman there, and she had said she used to sing. And I said, Anne-Marie, would you sing for us? And she said, I'll try it. And she told me sometime later, she used to always sing with her husband, and they had split up. And it was too lonely to sing without him. So she'd stop singing. Mm. So there were two people who came with a seeded gift inside them, and life had, for two totally different reasons, claimed their voice, and they had to find the guts to reclaim that voice. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy that there's a depot within your soul that allows people to come and find a safe space to reclaim that voice, because it's signature. It's as individual as your fingerprint. And we need to get over the notion that our voice is less than someone else's.
Yes, I love that. And I often say to my students, everybody is so different. We all have had a different life journey, and we all have a different message for the world. And when you or I take a song and sing it, it becomes completely ours, because we're imbibing it with our own life force, our soul. But we can bring more meaning to that song sometimes than the original recording. And I've had that experience numerous times with students, where I'll be touched by a song in a way that the original recording never touched me. And because that person is connected to that message. That's their soul's message. And I never tell people what to sing. I never tell them what songs to sing, because the most fun I have is hearing what somebody brings me. And sometimes students go through phases where they'll sing all very sad songs for many, many weeks, because they're healing through the choices of their songs. And it's a beautiful thing to see them come through the other side. We can't truly sing a song and perform it for other people until we have mastered the emotions within that song. Otherwise we'd be in a heap with tears. So it being able to go through a journey of learning a song and eventually singing it for others can actually be a process of healing in my work.
It's beautiful. It's like it's embodied. It's like what you're saying is that it can't be just words. It needs to be, I don't even know what the word imbibed means, but that's the word I'm getting. It's like it's got to be drank in first. It's got to be embodied first, so it becomes part of you. And you know, I think as Irish people, we have such a culture of singing, and that culture, I think, has gone through any cultures where there has been hard work and possibly a lot of control. So the only thing that people could do was go beyond the mind and use song as like a mantra. So say the Irish, you know, Corach rowers of the boats out on the islands doing Báidí Nailime, which maybe not all yours, but it's a song about the little boat and where it went to, and the rhythm of that song would bring you from one side of the island to the other on tough, rough seas where you literally needed to get out of your mind. You needed to go into mindfulness, do a mantra to get you over to the other side. And it was a collective embrace within the people to bring that boat to the other side all in one.
Yes.
And I had the luxury of going to Africa, and I saw this in action a few years ago. My daughter had wanted to go to Africa to a Missionville project that an Irish nun runs. And when I went out, I had no idea what to expect, but the second morning I got there, I heard the singing. And I found my way into a back kitchen, and there was 16 people, mostly black women, in a circle, and they were chanting all this holy words. It's the only way I could say it. I couldn't call it a song. And it was like they were calling down the heavens to help them with the day. And it was extremely moving. It was powerful. And at the end, they all went around and hugged each other and wished each other the strength to get through the day. And I went up to one of them afterwards and I said, that was particularly beautiful. I've never seen anything like that. Oh, she said, lady, this is the only way you're going to get through the day. If you don't call God in, oh, we're all gone. I was thinking, wow. And the next day, I had told a few people what was happening in the back kitchen. And when they came, they stopped. It was like they didn't want an audience. It wasn't for sacredness. This was part of them calling in the strengths, using the voice, grounding, protecting, getting themselves in the right state, and through song and through expression. And I saw out there firsthand that they had nothing. They were in a township, but they had singing. And I had a particularly moving experience where the nurse who was bringing me round, when I say a nurse, she would have been trained for maybe 6 to 7 weeks to give her enough to be able to do dressings and, you know, wash wounds and help with minimal care of patients who couldn't come down to the clinic. And she was with her grandmother, who she was dressing a leg for. And the leg was, in my eyes, just very off-putting. It was very infected. And as she started to take off the dressing, it was particularly painful because it was very oozy. So without anybody saying anything, the nurse started to sing a song. And her grandmother, whose leg she was nursing, sang in harmony in order to overcome the pain of taking off this horrific bandage for this awful ulcer. And I sat holding the lady's hand, and this beautiful singing was happening between the two of them with no prompting, with no exoneration. It was just what was needed to get through this 3 minutes procedure.
Wow.
And I came out and I was so moved, and I said to the nurse, oh my God, that was amazing. And she said to me, you know, she said, we don't have much here, but we can sing. She said, you know, you don't have to stay as you are. If you're sad in the world, you can sing. If you're sore in the world, you can sing. You can always sing. And we have song. And I stood there walking through this dry townships thinking, we've lost our ability to self-soothe.
Mm-hmm.
We've lost our ability to reach for our voice rather than antidepressants. We've lost our ability to find a way to cultivate an inner strength. And we've lost that.
Yes.
In our first world.
The culture is not there for it as much. I know, I mean, parents sometimes sing for children, but I think the way that we're taught in schools and the formal music teaching can be very off-putting to the average person, like being, put in, teaching the bars and sheet music or having to sing well, like it should be good enough in a school for everyone to sing rather than only certain people are allowed in because it needs to be a certain quality. I dislike that as an ethos for music. I think music should be for community and for the enjoyment of it, not for simply what the listeners will hear at the other end. I really love that story. So thank you for telling me that. I think everybody who's listening, I would just encourage you all to start humming along. Humming is my favourite thing to start people off as an access point to the voice. When you go, it's very simple, and you'll be singing in no time, and maybe we'll be singing for each other a bit more in the future.
I think that would be amazing, because I think we, especially with COVID, we need to start opening up that throat chakra. If we actually look at all the immunity issues, they're all based from here to here, from the lungs to the throat to the lungs. So yes. Even just to keep ourselves alive and kicking and happy and healthy at the moment, we need to be using all of the throat chakra areas. I teach about the throat chakra and how to clear the energy and how to use the right foods and colour and sound. I teach this in a masterclass, and anytime students come on that masterclass, it's a self-paced class, they find a way of actually working with the mantras and clearing right through, so that when they go to speak, there's a strength in their voice. And I think we need to start to do this. We need to treat our voice as part of our vehicle of expression. And I, for one, am delighted, Aideen, that you're doing what you're doing in being able to hold that space for people and to teach them how to work with the voice, to allow it to emit its message. I suppose my part is to help people with their message, and your part is to make sure it comes out. So we're probably
all at different stages
of the bridge. Yes, but it's I suppose a lot of people come to me who are involved with holistics, not specifically, but who are on some level of spiritual path, and a lot of the time through their awakening they've lost the words that would have rolled off their tongue because they don't have language. They've become a Reiki practitioner. They don't have the language to say what happens when a client comes. They've become a songwriter. They've never written a song before, so they feel like, gosh, what qualification have I got to say I can write songs or poetry? And they have no confidence in the message that they need to bring. And yet without that message coming out in this lifetime, as they often say, they die with that song in them. And I feel, as someone who helps people to nurture their true nature and live from the soul, that soul afraid of dying that never learns to live, that soul afraid of expressing itself in case it finds judgment, that soul that is waiting for permission to be itself, will be the most lost soul. So whatever your message is, it's important to find ways of affirming what that is, so that you can stand in your power in your own simple way and just say what's needed to be said knowing that you will find the people where your voice is not drowned out. You'll find that space in the orchestra. And there will be somebody, could be you, could be me, could be someone else, who conducts you as you learn to use that voice.
That is beautiful. Beautiful. And I just encourage anyone listening to contact either myself or Juliana to find that next step, because your voice matters so much. It matters so much that nobody else stands in your shoes. And I really feel like there's people who will never, connect with their soul until the people listening start to connect to their souls. It's almost like that ripple effect. We're responsible for our own journey, but our own journey will impact everybody who knows you. So it isn't just your journey. It isn't just important for you. It's important for us all that everybody takes their next steps to do something that allows them to speak or to sing, but most of all to bring your message to the rest of us. So thank you so much, Juliana, for today. Absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Tell us a little bit about your masterclass on the voice before we finish up, and let people know how they can follow you and keep in touch with you.
Well, we've spoken about so many things here, and it's been an honour and a privilege, Aideen. Thank you. What I have found is that because I'm a soul reader, a lot of the diseases that happen, that we go, I don't know what happened there, happen because something's happening in the body where the energy's cut. Mm-hmm. So this is probably for people who have maybe reoccurring bronchitis, tonsillitis, thyroid problems, tinnitus, dry mouth, grinding of teeth. They're all things that go with the throat chakra. So I help people in the masterclass to walk through ways of healing those things and coming to terms with what is it that's happening in my body that's actually trying to heal and trying to allow me to find my voice. So I go through everything from the foods that are good to boost that part of our energy system, to working with light, working with sound frequencies, invoking the illuminations that are going to help us to stand in our power, learning how to say no, learning when to say sorry, and really bringing in that sense of healing. And I've had many people, I've had over hundreds now at this stage through that masterclass. It's an on-life, self-paced masterclass, and you get your meditation, which brings the chant, and then you get your modules, and it takes 20 minutes a day. But sometimes that could be something somebody could do who's scared of taking the next step and actually coming to a formal class to sing for fun.
Yes.
But they feel, I know there's something I need to heal from in here. I know I need a bit of courage. I know I need someone to help me to release this. And I want to find what are the chains that are holding this stuck, because I do want to have fun. Mm-hmm. I do want to release this, and I want to find my voice in the world. So from those 14 days, the ripple effect is incredible of bringing people the strength and confidence to begin to use that voice again, to stop blushing, to stop having that run of red going up, to stop feeling that dry mouth that you can't speak.
Yeah.
And all those things that are associated with that chakra being blocked. And I think once they can release that, they will release the message. They will sing for fun. Mm-hmm. And we're all looking for something new to do. So why not learn to sing?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Juliana. Mm-hmm. And you can find Juliana on her Facebook page, which is Signposts by Julianna Jay. And also you can look up Juliana's work on her website, juliannajay.com. It's a beautiful website. I took a little look at it there a few minutes ago and was having a little look at the workshop, and it's very nicely laid out, very warm, welcoming feeling from your site, which is very like you, which is lovely to see that is aligned beautifully. So well done with that. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we finish up?
You know, There may be people who are listening on here who may never want to sing a song, but they have a yearning, burning feeling, and they know they're at a crossroads of something bigger and something more. And they may feel that after this year of lockdown or whatever, it's time. It's time to lead a legacy. It's time to get a bit of courage and a bit of confidence, to do whatever it is that your soul is calling you to do. I'm probably biased after watching thousands of people all around the world come to me and finding what they needed for the next step. But I do think anyone following a spiritual path, it's a letter you will never burn. It's a letter you'll never lose. You'll probably place beside your bedside. So that signpost from the soul is something that I really would encourage people to open their heart and their mind to, because it's a gentle frequency of love that encourages you to be you in a most unique way and brings through your authenticity. But it's laced with love and support that I cannot convey to you. But it is that feeling of being touched by something more, maybe even being touched by an angel.
That's absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much, Juliana. Signing off for today. Thank you all for listening. You do matter. You do matter. And we are here for you. And please reach out. Never feel alone. I always feel like one thing people forget is that it's, there's always someone who's there to support you. And if it's not myself or Juliana, take the next step for you, because you matter. Thank you so much, Juliana. Take care. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.